Hello and welcome back to another video. Today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be personifying Aspec Identities as fantasy characters. And we're going to be doing this for three orientations: asexuality, aromanticism, and demisexuality. So basically what I'm doing is I'm taking that orientation, I'm taking the stereotypes around it, the misconceptions about it, the general vibe, the memes, the symbols of that community and identity, and I'm trying to then craft that into a personification of that identity through D&D 5e. So without further ado, let's get started with asexuality. So here on the screen, I have D&D Beyond open, and I have made this character who I've called Illyrian Amithia. No particular reason for that name, I just thought it sounded cool. So there are a few main bits to a D&D character. The bits we're mainly going to be talking about today will be the race, the class, the subclass, and then if there's any other extra details which I think add to the theming of the character. So this character is a gem dragonborn, specifically an amethyst dragonborn. And the simple reason I chose that is because dragons are a huge symbol in the ace community. An amethyst gem dragonborn is purple. So here we have our ace coloured theming of having a purpley dragon. I thought it gave a cool visual theming to the character that kind of alluded to the fact that they're personifying asexuality. And the second thing we have on our list is class. And the class I've chosen for this character is Warlock. Now, a Warlock in D&D 5e is a person who has made a deal with some eldritch or otherworldly being in order to get magical power. And you may be wondering, why has the personification of asexuality made a deal with an eldritch being? Well, as you may or may not know, a lot of allo people think that it is a fundamental part of being human to feel sexual attraction. It is a key part of the human experience to want sex. And I thought it would be a fun allusion to that to make this personification of asexuality a warlock. They have somehow, they have made a deal with some eldritch entity which has granted them immunity to the sexual attraction that the rest of the population may feel. And in doing so, that eldritch knowledge has given them magical powers. To clarify though, asexual people are as normal as anyone else, and they just don't feel sexual attraction. There's nothing wrong with that. However, I think it's a cool theming to play on that idea that there's something wrong, but twist it in a positive light where this character has power, magical power, because of that wrongness. And finally, the subclass that I have chosen for asexuality is Fathomless. The Fathomless is basically a eldritch being that lives deep in the ocean. Sort of like, it has some Lovecraftian elements to it, I suppose, which is also shared with the Great Old One subclass for a Warlock. But I just really wanted to lean onto this aspect of the character being getting some eldritch knowledge, something that's really unfathomable, fathomless, in not feeling sexual attraction. The other bit I wanted to go over here quickly was spells. So I've created these characters at level 3, so they don't have too many spells. I just wanted to create like a baseline character. I've given them invisibility because, as we know, asexual people are invisible. I've given them silence, which I think would be very useful for if an aphobe is trying to talk to you. You can just be like, silence, and then leave. And I've also given them darkness to just kind of add to that invisibility feeling. But those are pretty much all the theme spells I give them. But that's a quick overview of that character. I will be leaving these character sheets, links to these character sheets in the description below if you want to look into them in more detail. But with that out of the way, let's move on to my aromantic character. Or should I say my aromanticism character. So for my aromanticism character, I have chosen it to be a high elf. And just from the fact that we've just gone from Gem Dragonborn, this crystalline lizard-like creature with like who can breathe out waves of force, to an elf, it may seem a bit uninteresting. The reason I've gone with this race is because elves in fiction are often portrayed as quite androgynous. Why does that relate to aromanticism? Well, in my experience, the Arrow community in particular has a lot of trans and non-binary individuals in them. So I wanted to once again allude to this strong sense of gender non-conformity that exists in the Arrow community by making them a race which is generally more androgynous. And secondly, we have the class. Now, I've chosen Fighter. But the reason I've chosen Fighter is not because of this class specifically, but for the subclass that I've chosen with it, which is Arcane Archer. Do you see where this is going yet? An abbreviation for aromantic is Arrow. And Arrow is a homonym with arrow, as in, I mean, I probably could have said that a bit better. Arrow, short for aromantic, is a homonym for arrow, as in bow and arrow. So I wanted to play into that by creating my aromantic or my aromanticism character as someone who is like magically, arcanely good with a bow. And finally, the last thing was the background for this character. These characters aren't very fleshed out, as you can tell, they're just baselines, but I chose the background to be a criminal or spy. There was a couple of reasons for this. Mainly it was the whole be gay, do crime joke, I suppose. But also, I think that our society is so heavily built around romance and relationships that by being aromantic, you are breaking that expectation and swimming against the current of thing, which I think actually, now that I think about it, lends more to the fighter class rather than just the subclass. An aromantic person has to fight day in and day out to just live as themselves because there's so much in society working against them. But yeah, that was the second character. The character embodies aromanticism, Merry Talonflame. Once again, I just chose a name which to me sounded a bit non-binary. Like, it didn't sound specifically male or female. And Talonflame is just a Pokemon, and I think it's cool. But finally, we have the demisexuality character. And please don't hate me, demisexual people, because I had an idea with this one, and I think it's quite funny, but I can understand why people get insulted. This is all in good fun, and I hope that you can take it lightheartedly. So the race that I have made for this character is a turtle, which is D&D's version of a tortoise person. And the only reason why I did this is because a demisexual person is someone who doesn't feel sexual attraction until they form a strong emotional bond with them. And that kind of reminded me of how they could have like a defensive barrier around them, protecting them from sexual attraction until they're ready, until they have that emotional bond and can therefore then feel it. Like a shell, basically. And similarly, tortoises are known for being very slow, and I think in general, person who is demi, their relationship would probably progress a bit slower than other people. It's not necessarily a bad thing, it's just a different way of going about relationships. So I wanted to take the imagery of tortoises being slow and tortoises being like very sturdy and defensive, and relate that to how demisexuality is, or at least how it can be portrayed. But to contrast with this, their class is a bard. I know what you may be thinking. If you are familiar with how bards are generally portrayed, especially in a mimetic way, they are seen as overtly and violently sexual in some cases. They will sleep with anyone and anything. But this is not an interpretation that I myself subscribe to. And a bard is a traveller who likes telling tales. They're very charismatic. They relay stories, and these stories and this music has a magical power within D&D settings. I thought this idea of a very charismatic person, because they like to get to know people, they want to get to know them so they can then feel sexual attraction and have that bond with them as well, is something that kind of matched my idea of what a bard is, or what a bard should be. Also, on an unrelated side note, I think a tortoise person with bagpipes is very funny. The subclass that I've chosen for this one is a lore bard. So a lore bard is your general like more spellcasting bard, but because they're more interested in the lore side of it rather than the combat, which you'd get from like a valor or swords bard, I thought that worked with the whole theme of wanting to get to know people and things before committing yourselves to them. And I'm just going to go over a couple of spells here like I did with the asexuality one as well. So I gave them things like Identified, Tech Thought, Zone of Truth, because they're so good at getting to know people, or like they're very interested in getting to know people. Those would sort of help with that. I also gave them See Invisibility as a kind of mirror to asexuality. So because demisexual people are obviously huge, in general they tend to be like big allies of the ace community because it's kind of as tight-knit. They're considered on the ace spectrum and that sort of thing. I thought it would be funny where the asexuality character would be invisible, and then only the demisexuality character would be able to see them. Obviously the aromanticism would too, but there was some nice interplay there that I thought was interesting. But yeah, those are my 3 characters. The last one was called Rogu Pineshell. Once again, just a name. So yeah, so those are my 3 characters, 1 for asexuality, 1 for aromanticism, and 1 for demisexuality. Thank you, Sushi, for moving my camera. That's pretty much all I had to say today. I hope you enjoyed this silly little video, and I will leave links to those 3 character sheets in the description below if you want to look at them. If you disagree with me about any of them, then do let me know, and also just let me know if you've got any other ideas for other orientations on what race class combinations they would be. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, then please leave a like. I post videos every Saturday, so if you want to see more, then feel free to subscribe. That is all I had to say today. Have a wonderful day, and I shall see you next time.